The cameras flashed. The crowd froze. And just like that, Hollywood had a new obsession. Well, in this case, a massive medical emergency that stopped an entire comedy empire right in its tracks. Welcome to Starscope Report.
Join us as we uncover Hollywood drama, music industry shakeups, and, viral influencer scandals. From red carpet surprises to social media controversies, we dive deep into the stories behind the fame.
And today's deep dive is a really fascinating one, customized just for you listening. We are looking at a wild stack of recent reports and biographical sources based on this headline: Larry the Cable Guy rushed to hospital after sudden health scare.
Right. It's just the ultimate plot twist that nobody writes into their schedule. One minute you're this massive cultural icon anchoring a major network television comeback, and the next you're just a vulnerable human being in a hospital bed.
Exactly, and we're going to unpack exactly what happened during this emergency hospitalization this past week. Plus, we're looking at the incredible, almost jarring duality between the loud, catchphrase-slinging character on stage and the real man behind the flannel, Daniel Lawrence Whitney.
Yeah, the contrast between his public persona and private reality is just stark. But let's start with the medical scare itself. Based on reports from TMZ and other outlets, this unfolded incredibly fast.
Super fast.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh.
On the night of Thursday, July 23, 2026, the 63-year-old comedian was rushed to a hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska. The diagnosis was acute appendicitis.
Which I think a lot of people hear and just assume it's like a routine stomach ache. You go in, get a quick surgery, and you're fine. But I always think of the appendix like a dormant little volcano sitting in your gut.
That is actually a great way to put it.
Right, because it's completely ignored. You don't even know it's there until the exact moment it erupts and just forcefully shuts down everything in its vicinity.
Yeah, that is a highly accurate way to visualize it. I mean, for anyone who hasn't experienced it, appendicitis is not something you can just push through with painkillers.
No, definitely not.
The sources note his symptoms started as they typically do. It's this vague, generalized stomach pain that eventually migrates, and then it sharpens into this severe, localized pain on the lower right side of the abdomen, along with fever and nausea.
So for you listening who might not know, what is actually happening inside the body when that pain hits? Like, why does it escalate so quickly?
Well, the appendix is this small, finger-shaped pouch attached to the lower right side of the large intestine. When it becomes inflamed, usually due to a sudden blockage or some kind of infection, it starts to swell.
Okay.
And because it's a closed pouch, the bacteria trapped inside multiply rapidly. The pressure builds up, cutting off blood flow to the tissue, which then begins to die.
Wow.
Yeah, and if you don't get immediate medical attention to surgically remove it or, treat it with heavy antibiotics, that swollen pouch can rupture.
And a rupture is where that dormant volcano actually erupts.
Precisely. If it bursts, it spills all that infectious material, all the bacteria and toxins, directly into the abdominal cavity.
Which sounds incredibly dangerous.
It is. It leads to a condition called peritonitis, which is a massive infection of the lining of your abdomen. Peritonitis can trigger sepsis and become life-threatening, incredibly fast. It goes from a localized pain to a systemic crisis in just a matter of hours.
That is terrifying. And it makes me wonder, with someone as busy as this, what happens to the massive machinery of their career when they are suddenly literally fighting a biological time bomb? Because a network television show doesn't just pause easily.
It doesn't. It throws a massive wrench into the gears of a very expensive machine. Fortunately, the medical team, who the reports jokingly noted Git-R-Done, managed the situation perfectly before any rupture occurred.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. He was laid up in bed for a couple of days and officially released on Saturday. He is currently back on his 180-acre farm, recovering well, in good spirits. But like you said, the career machinery absolutely hit a brick wall.
Right, because while he didn't have any immediate stand-up tour dates lined up, I think he just wrapped up a tour back in May in Erie, Pennsylvania. This health scare directly halted production on his upcoming CBS television series.
Yes, the new series is called American Mayhem, and it's slated for syndication in the fall of 2026.
And I was reading about the format of this show in our sources. Think of it as a modern, wilder cousin to America's Funniest Home Videos.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of just wholesome clips of kids and pets, American Mayhem focuses on extreme, outrageous viral videos from all across the country.
And television production on that scale is an enormous logistical puzzle. They were right in the middle of taping this 52-episode weekly comedy clip show when the appendicitis hit.
I can't even imagine the chaos on set.
You've got camera crews, lighting technicians, producers, network executives, all operating on a strict multi-million-dollar schedule. When the host goes down, you can't just film around him. Production is completely paused indefinitely until he is fully recovered and medically cleared to work under those hot studio lights again.
Which just goes to show, you can have ironclad network contracts, 100-person crew on standby, and millions of dollars on the line, but biology always has the final say. No amount of fame negotiates with an infected appendix.
It really does force a hard reset. But that temporary pause gives us a rare moment to look at the man who is actually recovering on that Nebraska farm. Because the guy resting in that farmhouse, sipping tea and watching the horses, is Daniel Whitney. It is not necessarily Larry.
And I want to dig into that contrast, but before we do, if you're loving these Hollywood twists, make sure you're subscribed. We've got even crazier stories ahead, because the physical isolation of his Nebraska farm really mirrors how separate his real life is from his public persona.
Oh, definitely.
How does a kid from the Midwest transform into the ultimate defining Southern caricature of the 21st century?
The origin story is fascinating, mainly because it completely defies the assumptions people make about the character. So Dan Whitney was born in Nebraska, where he did grow up on a farm. But when he was 16, his family moved to West Palm Beach, Florida, where he attended high school.
Wait, West Palm Beach, that is essentially a wealthy coastal resort city. That is about as far from a backwoods, blue-collar setting as you can possibly get in the United States.
I know. The contrast only deepens, too. He went to college, first at the Baptist University of America and then the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And do you know what his major was? Drama and speech.
A drama and speech major. So he's not just a guy who naturally talks like that and happens to be funny. He's essentially a trained actor constructing a highly specific dialect.
He really is a masterclass in vocal performance. That famous, thick Southern accent was entirely fabricated. He didn't grow up speaking like that at all.
Where did it even come from then?
He was inspired by his college roommates, who were from Texas and Georgia. He essentially studied their dialects, their specific regional mannerisms, their phrasing, and crafted this larger-than-life comedic persona totally from scratch.
I have to push back on something I read in the biographical sources here because it borders on, like, psychological self-sabotage. The sources say he stayed in character constantly. Is it really true that he refused to drop the accent, even in his private life?
Yeah, in his autobiographical book, he admits that for years, he deliberately kept the accent turned on, both on and off stage. He would use it at the grocery store, at the bank, ordering food.
You're kidding.
No, he was genuinely afraid he might lose the specific intonations or forget the nuances if he kept reverting back to his natural speaking voice.
That is baffling to me. It's like a pro wrestler who refuses to break kayfabe. You know that strict industry rule in professional wrestling where performers stay completely in character, acting like the storylines are real, even when they are out in public.
It's exactly like that.
To maintain a dialect, a posture, a specific worldview that isn't natively yours for 30 years, isn't there a massive danger of totally losing your own core identity if you refuse to turn off a caricature?
The psychological toll of that kind of total immersion has to be immense.
Yeah.
You're essentially living a double life where the fake identity becomes the primary breadwinner. But I mean, you cannot argue with the financial results.
Oh, not at all.
That sheer dedication to the craft launched him into the stratosphere. He spearheaded the blue-collar comedy tour alongside Jeff Foxworthy, Bill Engvall, and Ron White. We were talking multiple platinum and gold comedy albums here.
Right.
And he eventually became the voice of Mater in Pixar's multi-billion-dollar Cars franchise.
Not to mention the aggressive merchandising. I was stunned by this detail from the sources. He licensed his name to Bectrum Foods for an entire line of boxed hamburger dinners. You don't get a boxed dinner named after you unless your brand is so universally recognized that it transcends comedy and becomes an inescapable part of American grocery aisles.
He committed to the bit so thoroughly that the character became an industry unto itself. But wait till you hear what came next, because we really need to look at the actual man who reaps the rewards of that industry. The sources paint a picture of a guy who operates very differently when the cameras are finally off.
Yeah, he lives on that sprawling 180-acre farm outside Lincoln with his wife Kara, their 19-year-old son Wyatt, and their 18-year-old daughter Reagan. He breeds horses, tends cattle, and even sponsors rodeos like the Git-R-Done PRCA Extreme Bulls event.
Right.
It is a very grounded, quiet, family-centric life compared to the screaming arenas he performs in.
And a deeply generous one, too. The philanthropy aspect documented in these sources reveals a lot about his true priorities. Specifically, we have to talk about his massive $5 million donation to the Arnold Palmer Hospital for Children in Orlando.
That stuck out to me, too, because it wasn't just like a tax write-off. There is a deeply terrifying personal story behind that money. When his son Wyatt was an infant, he was diagnosed with a severe case of hip dysplasia.
Yeah. And for listeners who might not be familiar with the mechanics of that condition, hip dysplasia is a congenital issue where the hip socket doesn't fully cover the ball portion of the upper thigh bone.
Okay, so the joint is loose.
Exactly. The joint is essentially too loose. If left untreated in an infant, the cartilage wears down unevenly. That can lead to severe joint damage, permanent limping, or complete dislocation as they start to walk.
That is a terrifying reality for a new parent to face. You're looking at your baby, realizing their basic mobility is threatened before they've even taken their first step.
It really is.
Yeah.
But they sought treatment at that specific hospital in Orlando under a specialist named Dr. Chad Price. And the medical intervention was a complete success. Wyatt was cured.
That's amazing.
And the relief and gratitude Whitney felt were so profound that he went far beyond just writing a thank you check.
He literally weaponized his fame for the hospital. He actively went on game shows like Family Feud and Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader with the sole purpose of raising money for them.
Yeah, he did.
He and his wife made enormous private donations, ultimately funding the creation of the Wyatt Whitney Wing, which opened in 2012 to specialize in the International Hip Dysplasia Institute. It really humanizes him to see that level of fierce parental gratitude.
It really does. But of course, no matter how quiet or philanthropic his private life is, when you are a celebrity of that magnitude, the sheer chaos of fame still manages to generate some absolutely bizarre headlines.
Okay, I've been waiting to get to this part of the notes because it sounds like a bad movie script, but it is entirely real. And later in the episode, we'll talk about the shocking cultural shift nobody saw coming. But first, we have to talk about the 2016 football game arm wrestling incident.
Oh my gosh, it is an incredible piece of trivia. So in October 2016, he is hanging out in a luxury suite at Memorial Stadium watching a Nebraska Cornhuskers game. A fellow attendee, who happens to be an Army veteran and National Guard member, challenges him to a friendly arm wrestling match right there in the luxury box.
Just two guys goofing around, matching strength. But in under a minute, Larry accidentally breaks the soldier's humerus bone. He snaps the guy's arm.
Yep.
And when you read that, it sounds completely made up. But from a biomechanical standpoint, how on earth does a comedian accidentally break a soldier's arm without doing it on purpose?
Believe it or not, it actually happens more often than you'd think in amateur arm wrestling. It comes down to torsional force. When you are arm wrestling, you aren't just pushing your opponent's hand sideways. You are applying an immense amount of internal rotational torque to the humerus bone. That's the long bone in your upper arm.
Okay, I'm wincing just thinking about this.
It's awful. The bone is incredibly strong against bending, but it is highly vulnerable to twisting forces. If both people lock up and apply maximum rotational pressure, the bone can suddenly succumb to a spiral fracture. It just snaps under the torque with a loud pop.
Ugh. It's a brutal reminder of physical limits. And speaking of things that spiral out of control incredibly fast, the sources also detail a cruel internet death hoax from July of 2023. A totally baseless rumor spread like wildfire across social media, claiming he had passed away.
It really illustrates the strange, uncontrollable reality of modern fame. Misinformation propagates in the digital age faster than any publicist can counter it. But Whitney handled it with a lot of humor, posting proof of life online. It speaks to his ability to weather internet storms without panicking.
Which provides a really seamless transition into how he views surviving much larger cultural storms. His physical isolation in Nebraska mirrors his professional isolation from Hollywood's traditional gatekeepers, especially when it comes to the changing landscape of comedy. And stay tuned and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next, because this part is fascinating.
This is a crucial part of his recent press cycle. In an interview with US Weekly, he directly addressed what it's like performing stand-up in today's shifting cultural environment, specifically commenting on the, quote, woke climate.
And just a quick critical note for you listening. Our goal today is purely to unpack the strategic mechanics found in these sources. We're completely impartial here. We aren't taking sides on the political or cultural debates happening in comedy right now, nor are we endorsing these viewpoints. We just want to look at how a legacy comedian organically navigates this deeply polarized landscape based on the source material.
Exactly. Our role is strictly analytical here. And what the text of that US Weekly interview reveals is that Whitney refuses to let modern cultural shifts dictate his material. His stance is incredibly pragmatic and deeply rooted in economics. He essentially stated that we live in a free country. If people don't like his act, They simply don't have to buy a ticket.
He relies heavily on a built-in, historically loyal fan base. He told the interviewer, "If I think it's funny, I'm going to do it and we'll see where it goes." He isn't trying to adapt his material to win over a new, hypercritical demographic.
To illustrate his point about surviving cultural backlash, he cited another comedian, Shane Gillis. For context, Shane Gillis was hired as a cast member for Saturday Night Live in 2019. However, he was fired just 4 days later when old clips surfaced of him using slurs on a past podcast. It was a massive, highly publicized termination by a traditional network gatekeeper.
But Gillis didn't disappear. As Whitney pointed out in his interview, Gillis essentially ignored the mainstream rejection, doubled down on his specific style of comedy, and built an enormous independent following through podcasting and YouTube.
Right.
He became so massively popular on his own that SNL actually swallowed their pride and invited him back to host the show in 2024.
And Whitney is using Gillis as tangible proof that cancellation doesn't have to be a career death sentence.
Yeah.
If we connect this to the macroeconomics of the entertainment industry, it reveals a massive structural shift. The entire ecosystem is fundamentally changed.
Because the audience now acts as an impenetrable shield.
Exactly that. Legacy comedians like Larry the Cable Guy, who spent decades building deep, direct relationships with their fans, operate in an entirely different reality than new performers trying to break into the industry. In the 1990s, if a television network fired you, your career was over because they controlled the only method of distribution.
But today, if a network cuts ties with you, but you have 3 million fans who will still buy your comedy albums online, download your independent podcasts, and buy concert tickets directly from your website, your career isn't over at all. You just changed your distribution method.
The math of cancellation no longer works if you own your audience. Whitney's supreme confidence in that U.S. Weekly interview comes from knowing his specific audience. The people who buy the tickets, stream the movies, and buy the boxed dinners aren't the ones calling for his cancellation. The traditional gatekeepers have lost their leverage over legacy acts.
It's a fascinating look at the mechanics of fame in the 2020s. You don't need the entire culture to approve of you. You just need a mathematically viable percentage of your people to stay fiercely loyal. And his people certainly are.
They are the foundation of an empire that allows him to live quietly on a farm, while a fictional character pays the bills.
Right, let's bring this deep dive full circle. The big takeaway from the news this week is that Daniel Whitney, the man who meticulously built a bulletproof comedy empire on a manufactured catchphrase and a sleeveless flannel shirt, had a very real, very frightening brush with his own biology. Appendicitis doesn't care about your syndication deals.
But the crisis was averted. He is resting comfortably at home on his farm. The heavy machinery of his career is temporarily paused. I mean, American Mayhem will have to wait just a little while longer to finish its 52-episode order, but he will be returning to his SiriusXM radio show and his television hosting duties soon enough.
But stepping back from the medical updates and the television schedules, delving into his history leaves us with something really profound to mull over. When a performer's fictional persona becomes this massive, this lucrative, and this entirely inseparable from their public identity, how much of the real person eventually gets lost to history?
It's the ultimate paradox of acting, isn't it? If you wear a mask every day for 30 years, does the mask eventually mold the face underneath?
It is something to seriously ponder the next time you see a dedicated character actor wholly consumed by their most famous role, blurring the lines of reality in a grocery store checkout line. Where does the act truly end and the person begin? We will leave you to think on that. You've been listening to Starscope Report, where you hosts uncover the stories shaping Hollywood, music, and pop culture. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that keep the stars shining.